am big, I am so big, I am big, I am so big, I am big, I am so big, I am big, I am so big.
The issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending is a major concern for many players and families. The allure of loot boxes and other forms of in-game spending can be hard to resist, and some players may find themselves spending more money than they can afford in an attempt to get a rare or valuable item. This can lead to players incurring significant debts, especially if they are not careful about managing their spending. The issue of indebtedness is especially relevant for younger players, who may not have a full understanding of the financial implications of their spending. It's not uncommon for children and teens to ask their parents to buy them in-game items or to use their own allowance or savings to make purchases. And while some parents may be able to afford these costs, others may struggle to keep up with the demands of their children. This can lead to financial strain and even resentment, as parents may feel like they are being taken advantage of by the game companies. But it's not just younger players who are at risk of becoming indebted. Even adult players can fall victim to the allure of in-game spending, especially if they are not careful about managing their finances. The addictive nature of loot boxes and other forms of in-game spending can make it easy for players to overspend, and this can lead to significant financial problems. The issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending is made even more complex by the fact that many of these games are free to play, meaning that players can download and play them for free. This can give players the false impression that the game is free, when in reality, they may be expected to make in-game purchases in order to progress or to unlock new content. This can lead to players spending more money than they had originally intended, as they may feel obligated to keep up with the game's progression or to keep up with other players. In addition to the issue of indebtedness, there is also the issue of predatory practices by some game companies. Some game companies have been criticized for using manipulative tactics to get players to spend more money. This can include things like offering limited-time deals or special offers that encourage players to make impulsive purchases, or using psychological tricks to make players feel like they are missing out on something if they don't make a purchase. These practices can be especially harmful to players who are vulnerable to addiction or who have difficulty managing their finances. So what can be done to address the issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending? One solution is for game companies to be more transparent about the costs associated with their games. This could include clearly disclosing the price of in-game items and the odds of receiving rare or valuable items from loot boxes. It could also include implementing measures to help players manage their spending, such as allowing players to set limits on their in-game spending or providing tools to track their spending. Another solution is for regulators and governments to take a more active role in protecting consumers from predatory practices. This could include enacting laws that require game companies to disclose the costs and odds associated with in-game purchases, or that impose limits on the amount of money that players can spend in a single transaction. It could also include stricter enforcement of existing laws that prohibit deceptive or manipulative marketing practices. Ultimately, The issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending is a complex and multifaceted problem that requires a comprehensive approach. It's important for game companies to be more transparent about the costs and risks associated with their games, and for regulators and governments to take a more active role in protecting consumers. And it's up to individual players to be mindful of their spending and to set limits. But it's not just the game companies and regulators who have a role to play in addressing the issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending. Players also have a responsibility to manage their spending and to be aware of the risks and costs associated with in-game purchases. One way that players can protect themselves is by setting limits on their in-game spending and by being mindful of their budget. This can help prevent players from overspending and incurring significant debts. It can also be helpful to track one's spending and to be aware of how much money is being spent on in-game purchases. Players can also protect themselves by being wary of limited-time deals or special offers, as these can be used by game companies to encourage impulsive spending. It's important to take the time to think about whether a purchase is truly necessary or desirable, rather than feeling like one has to make a purchase because of a limited-time offer. Another way that players can protect themselves is by being aware of the risks and costs associated with loot boxes and other forms of in-game spending. It's important to understand the odds of getting a rare or valuable item from a loot box, and to be aware that there is no guarantee of receiving any specific item. This can help players make more informed decisions about whether or not to make a purchase. Overall, the issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending is a complex and multifaceted problem that requires a comprehensive approach. Game companies, regulators, and players all have a role to play in addressing this issue and in creating a healthier and more sustainable gaming industry. By being mindful of their spending, players can protect themselves and help ensure that the gaming industry is focused on delivering truly enjoyable and rewarding experiences, rather than just trying to extract as much money from players as possible. It's important to recognize that the issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending is not just a problem for individual players, but it can also have wider social and economic impacts. The proliferation of in-game spending and microtransactions has led to an increase in the number of people who are struggling with financial problems as a result of their gaming habits. This can have serious consequences for individuals and families, including bankruptcy, relationship breakdowns, and mental health issues. The issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending can also have broader economic impacts. The gaming industry is a major contributor to the global economy, and the reliance on in-game spending and microtransactions has led to an increase in the amount of money being spent on gaming. While this may be good for the game companies, it may not be sustainable in the long term, as players may eventually become unwilling or unable to spend more money on in-game purchases. This could lead to a decline in the industry and have wider economic consequences. It's also important to consider the impact that the issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending has on society as a whole. The gaming industry is an important part of many people's lives, and it's important that it is a healthy and sustainable industry. The reliance on in-game spending and microtransactions may not be the best way to ensure the long-term viability of the industry, as it can lead to players becoming disillusioned and turning away from gaming altogether. This could have negative consequences for the industry and for the millions of people who enjoy playing games. In order to address the issue of indebtedness as a result of in-game spending, it's important for the gaming industry to adopt a more sustainable and player-focused approach. This could involve reducing the reliance on in-game spending and microtransactions, and focusing on creating games that are enjoyable and rewarding in their own right. It could also involve being more transparent about the costs and risks associated with in-game purchases, and implementing measures to help players manage their spending. By taking these steps, the gaming industry can help ensure that it is a healthy and sustainable industry that provides enjoyment and value to players, rather than one that is focused on extracting as much money from players as possible.